Caliph stood at the edge of the great stone circle, her silver eyes scanning the faces of her tribe's elders. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder of the terrible moment she was about to face. The elders were silent, their eyes cold and judgmental. The air was thick with tension, and Caliph could feel the weight of their stares like a crushing weight on her shoulders. Caliph of the Jari tribe, the High Elder, an ancient female with skin like cracked stone, spoke in a voice that echoed through the gathered crowd. You have been found guilty of violating the sacred laws of our people. You have used the forbidden powers, powers that even our gods do not dare to wield. Caliph's throat tightened. She tried to speak, but no words came. She wanted to explain, to tell them that she hadn't chosen the powers she had. She had never asked for them. The strange energy that pulsed through her veins had always been there, a part of her she couldn't control. But no one in the tribe would understand. They only saw her as a threat, as something dangerous. You are a danger to the very core of our tribe's existence, the High Elder continued. We cannot allow such power to remain among us. The balance has been broken. You are no longer welcome in the Jari tribe. The words hit Caliph like a physical blow. Her chest tightened, and she felt a burning sensation behind her eyes. She had known this was coming, but hearing it aloud made the pain feel real. It was as if her very soul was being ripped from her body. She had been born into the Jari tribe, raised with their customs and traditions, and now she was being cast out. The crowd murmured, some with pity, others with fear. No one stepped forward to speak on her behalf. Caliph felt the weight of their silence more than the words. They had all turned their backs on her. Leave, the High Elder ordered, her voice cutting through the air. Go into the wilderness. If you survive, then perhaps you are worthy of redemption. But know this, if you return, you will die by our hands. Caliph's knees felt weak, but she forced herself to stand tall. She didn't want to show them how much their words hurt. She turned away from the circle of elders, feeling the cold, empty eyes of her people on her back. She didn't even look at her family. They were just as silent as the rest. No one cared. As she walked away from the gathering, she could hear the murmurs behind her, but none of them mattered. Her mind was clouded with anger and sadness, but deep down, a part of her knew that her exile was inevitable. Her powers, her difference, had always set her apart. And now, they had turned against her. The sun was setting as she made her way into the wilderness. The deep red of the sky mirrored the fury in her heart, but it also gave her some comfort. She knew this land. She had spent her childhood running through these forests, playing with the wild creatures and exploring the endless landscapes. But now, it was no longer a safe place. It was a prison, one she would have to survive alone. She walked for hours, her boots crunching against the dry earth, the sound of her footsteps the only company she had. She tried not to think about what the future held. She had no plan, no place to go. All she had was the raw instinct to survive. As darkness fell, the air grew colder, and the wilderness around her came alive with the sounds of night. The growl of a distant predator sent a chill down her spine, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. There was no time for fear. She kept moving, finding a small cave to shelter in for the night. Her fingers fumbled as she started a fire using the basic survival skills she had learned over the years. The flames flickered to life, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. The warmth of the fire felt good, but it couldn't ease the emptiness inside her chest. She had been abandoned. Caliph curled up by the fire, pulling her knees close to her chest. Her mind raced with thoughts of her tribe, her family, her friends. She had always been different, yes, but she had never imagined this. Exiled. Alone. Her silver eyes stung with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't let the tribe see her weak. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. The night passed slowly. The howl of wild creatures echoed through the wilderness. But Caliph didn't sleep. Her mind kept drifting back to the day's events. She could still hear the High Elder's words, ringing in her ears. You are no longer welcome. The night passed slowly. The howl of wild creatures echoed through the wilderness. But Caliph didn't sleep. Her mind kept drifting back to the day's events. She could still hear the High Elder's words ringing in her ears. You are no longer welcome. But she was strong. She had to be. She couldn't afford to break. Not now. The first light of dawn broke through the cave entrance, casting a pale glow across the ground. Caliph stood, stretching her stiff limbs, and began to gather her things. The fire had burned out, leaving only the remnants of ash. She couldn't stay here. The wilderness was vast, and she had no idea where she would find food or shelter, but she knew she couldn't stay in one place for long. The wilderness was both her enemy and her only chance of survival. As she walked through the dense forest, she wondered if her tribe would come after her. Would they send hunters to find her? Would they kill her if she didn't die in the wilderness? The thought made her blood run cold. But even as the fear gripped her, another feeling started to rise inside her. A determination to prove that she was stronger than they thought. She wasn't just a threat. She was a survivor. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet gave way, and she stumbled, her heart racing, as she grabbed onto a nearby tree to steady herself. Looking down, she saw a massive creature, a wild beast, staring up at her with glowing eyes. She knew the creature. It was a hunter, one of the many dangerous predators that roamed the wilds. Her pulse quickened. She had no weapons, no way to defend herself. The beast took a step forward, its claws scraping against the earth. It was closing in fast. Caliph's heart hammered in her chest as she backed away slowly. She needed a way out. She couldn't fight this beast with just her powers. She had never tried. The only chance she had was to run. She spun around and bolted through the dense trees, her breath coming in short gasps. The creature's growls echoed behind her, getting closer with every step. She could feel its presence, like a shadow on her heels. Then, out of nowhere, a loud noise shattered the air. A sudden burst of light filled the forest, and Caliph instinctively ducked, covering her head. The ground beneath her feet trembled. When she opened her eyes, she saw something she never expected. A human figure, standing tall and confident. The human's weapon was still smoking from the blast, and the beast lay motionless on the ground, dead. The human walked toward her, his expression unreadable. His clothes were simple but rugged, and he held a weapon she didn't recognize. "Are you all right?" the human asked, his voice calm yet filled with authority. Caliph blinked in surprise, her pulse still racing from the chase. She had been saved by a human. Her heart slammed in her chest, but she couldn't help the words that escaped her lips. "Who are you?" The human tilted his head slightly, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "Name's Ethan. And you're lucky I showed up when I did." Caliph said nothing for a moment. She stared at him, trying to process what had just happened. She had been abandoned by her people, thrown out into a dangerous world. And now, this human, a stranger, had just saved her life. Could he be trusted, or was he just another threat waiting to take advantage of her situation? But in that moment, with the wild beast defeated and the air still thick with tension, Caliph felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, this human could be the ally she needed. Caliph stood frozen, staring at the human who had just saved her life. Her mind raced, trying to process the events that had unfolded so quickly. One moment, she was running for her life from the terrifying beast, and the next, she was staring at a stranger, a human, standing confidently in front of her. Admiral Park stood up. "This is insane. You want to treat an advanced spacefaring species like a pack of wild dogs." "No," Dr. Kim corrected. "I want to acknowledge that intelligence can exist in forms different from our own. The Rakari have space travel and advanced technology, but their social structures appear to be based on predator-pack dynamics. That's not inferior, it's just different. And humanity has unique experience in bridging this exact kind of gap." She showed one final piece of footage, Ancient video of a wolf trainer working with a wild pack. We've done the impossible before. We turned wolves into dogs, made killers into companions. The Rakari may be more advanced, but the principles could be the same. The council chamber erupted in heated discussion. Some members shouted that it was too risky. Others argued that they had nothing to lose. Dr. Kim waited patiently as the debate raged around her. Finally, Council Chair Lee Bin raised his hand for silence. Dr. Kim, what exactly are you proposing as a first step? Let me work with the captured Rakari from the Horizon incident, she replied. Give me 6 months to test my theory. If I'm wrong, we've lost nothing. If I'm right, she paused, looking at each council member in turn. We might just turn humanity's greatest threat into our strongest allies. The vote was close, but in the end, the council approved her proposal. As Dr. Kim gathered her materials, Admiral Park approached her. I think you're going to get people killed, he said bluntly. Dr. Kim met his gaze. Maybe, but we're already dying. At least this way. We're trying something new. She tucked her data pad under her arm and headed for the door. Her real work was about to begin, and she had a feeling it would either make history or get her killed. Either way, humanity's approach to the Rakari was about to change forever. The observation room was cold and quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the occasional whispered conversation. Dr. Kimney sat hunched over her workstation, her eyes red from staring at screens for hours. Behind the reinforced viewing window, 3 Rakari moved around their enclosure, their armored bodies reflecting the artificial lighting. Song Mai stood beside her, making notes as they watched the aliens' movements. For the past 2 weeks, they had been studying the captured Rakari nonstop, looking for patterns that others had missed. The creatures were smaller than humans expected up close, about the size of large wolves, but their natural armor and incredible speed made them formidable. Look at this, Dr. Kim pointed to her screen, playing footage from earlier that day. See how the largest one always eats first, and how the others maintain a specific distance while waiting their turn. Song Mi nodded, making another note. Just like wolf pack hierarchy, the alpha eats first, establishes dominance through food priority. She zoomed in on the footage, and look at their posture, heads lowered, no direct eye contact. Classic submission behaviors. The team had transformed an entire section of the research facility into a dedicated Rakari study center. Walls were covered with comparative anatomy charts, behavior analysis graphs, and timeline maps of every recorded Rakari encounter. They had even brought in experts who had worked with Earth's most dangerous predators. Play the interaction from this morning again, Dr. Kim requested. The screen showed a feeding session where a researcher had accidentally made direct eye contact with the largest Rakari. The creature had immediately displayed aggressive behavior, but in a very specific way. It's not random aggression, Song Mei pointed out. Look at the pattern. Warning display first, raising those armor plates, then the vocal warning. The actual aggressive movement only comes after both warnings are ignored. They have a clear communication system. Dr. Kim pulled up another video, this one from an old nature documentary about wolf rehabilitation. The similarities in behavior patterns were striking. Every spacefaring race has tried to approach them as equals, she said quietly. They sent diplomats, tried to establish common ground through technology or trade. But look at how the Rakari respond. They treat every direct approach as a challenge. The team had made another interesting discovery about Rakari physiology. Their natural armor wasn't just for protection. It was a complex communication system. The plates could shift and change position, displaying different patterns that seemed to convey specific messages to other Rakari. One of their youngest team members, a fresh graduate named Kang Wu, had spent days cataloging these patterns. It's like a physical language, he explained during the evening briefing. Different combinations mean different things. We've identified patterns for aggression, submission, greeting, and even what might be curiosity. The breakthrough came during the 3rd week. They were watching footage of a failed diplomatic mission, when Song Me noticed something crucial. "Look at how they reacted when the ambassadors tried to establish eye contact," she said excitedly. "Now watch this." She played footage of wild wolves encountering humans for the first time. The reactions were almost identical. Direct eye contact was seen as a challenge, an aggressive act that triggered defensive responses. Dr. Kim spent that night reviewing all their data, putting together a new theory. The next morning, she gathered her team. "We've been thinking about this backwards," she explained. "We keep trying to find ways to make them understand us. But what if we learn to communicate like them instead?" The team began developing a radical new protocol. They studied thousands of years of human experience with predator domestication, from the first wolves that approached human campfires to modern animal training techniques. Everything was analyzed, adapted and modified to work with an intelligent spacefaring species that happened to operate on predator pack instincts. "The key is understanding their social hierarchy," Song Mai explained during a presentation to facility leadership. "Every Rakari group we've observed has a clear power structure. They don't want to negotiate. They want to know where everyone fits in the hierarchy." They began implementing small changes in how they interacted with their captive Rakari. No more direct eye contact. Body language was modified to match Rakari submission and dominance signals. Even the feeding schedule was adjusted to match their natural patterns. The first positive results came unexpectedly. During a routine feeding, one of the Rakari displayed a new plate pattern none of them had seen before. It took them hours to analyze the footage, but when they did, excitement spread through the team. "It's not an aggression or submission display," Dr. Kim announced, her voice trembling with excitement. "Based on the context and timing, we think it's their equivalent of asking a question. They're trying to understand us too." As the team worked late into the night, documenting their findings and refining their protocols, Dr. Kim looked through the observation window at the sleeping Rakari. "We spent so long trying to make them understand our civilization," she said softly to Song Me, "that we never considered learning to understand theirs." Their report to the Defense Council was comprehensive. They had identified key behavioral patterns, developed preliminary communication protocols, and most importantly, proven that the Rakari were capable of non-aggressive interaction when approached correctly. Now came the hard part, convincing the Council to let them test their theories with conscious human-Rakari interaction. As Dr. Kim prepared her presentation, she knew they were on the verge of either a historic breakthrough or a catastrophic failure. Either way, they had already learned more about the Rakari in 3 weeks than humanity had in years of violent encounters. The future of human-Rakari relations would depend on whether humanity could accept that sometimes the path to understanding an alien species meant acknowledging that not all intelligent life thought like humans did. The red Martian landscape stretched endlessly outside the reinforced windows of Research Station Alpha. Inside, Dr. Kim now watched nervously as Officer Choi Tai prepared to enter the Rakari containment area. After months of research and preparation, they were finally ready to attempt direct contact. The observation room was packed with researchers, security personnel, and medical staff. Everyone held their breath as Choi checked his protective gear one last time. He carried no weapons. Their research showed that even the presence of weapons triggered aggressive responses from the Rakari. "Remember the protocol," Dr. Kim spoke softly into her microphone. "No sudden movements. No direct eye contact. If they display raised armor plates, immediately show submission posture." Choi nodded, his hand steady as he approached the airlock. He had spent weeks practicing Rakari body language patterns, learning to move his body in ways that mimicked their communication style. As a former handler of Earth's most dangerous predators, he understood the importance of physical communication. The airlock hissed open. Inside the containment area, 3 Rakari immediately focused their attention on him. Their armor plates shifted, creating patterns that the team had learned to recognize as warning displays. Choi moved slowly, keeping his head lowered and his body language submissive. He could hear the Rakari moving, their clawed feet clicking against the floor. The largest one, which they had designated as the Alpha, moved forward. Heart rate elevated but stable, someone reported from the medical station. Blood pressure within acceptable range. The Alpha Rakari made a low growling sound, its armor plates fully extended in a dominance display. This was the crucial moment. Every previous attempt at contact had failed here, usually ending in violence. But Choi had studied hundreds of hours of footage. He understood what the Rakari was actually saying with its display. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered himself into a traditional submission pose, keeping his head down and exposing his neck. The observation room was dead silent. The Alpha Rakari approached Choi, its powerful body coiled and ready to strike. It circled him once, twice, examining him from every angle. Then, to everyone's amazement, its armor plates slowly relaxed. It's accepting his submission. Song Mai whispered excitedly. Look at the plate patterns. That's the acceptance display we documented. The next part of the protocol was even riskier. Still moving slowly, Choi began to straighten up. He kept his movements smooth and deliberate, transitioning from complete submission to a more neutral stance. The Rakari watched intently but didn't attack. Then Choi did something that made several observers gasp. He raised his head and squared his shoulders, displaying dominant body language. It wasn't a full challenge, but rather a demonstration of rising status within the pack hierarchy. The Alpha Rakari's reaction was immediate. Its plates shifted rapidly, creating complex patterns across its body. Everyone tensed, expecting violence. Instead, the creature made a series of short barking sounds and lowered its head slightly, acknowledging Choi's rise in status while maintaining its own dominant position. My God, Dr. Kim breathed. They understand. They actually understand. Over the next hour, Choi continued to interact with the Rakari, using the body language patterns they had developed. The aliens responded consistently, showing clear understanding of the communication attempts. Most importantly, they showed no aggressive behavior as long as proper pack protocol was followed. The breakthrough came when the Alpha Rakari approached Choi with a different plate pattern, one they had never seen before. Instead of backing away, Choi held his ground and mimicked a calming gesture they had observed between Rakari pack members. The alien stopped, its head tilting in what looked remarkably like curiosity. Then it did something unprecedented. It deliberately altered its plate pattern to match Choi's calming gesture. They're learning, Song Mai said, furiously taking notes. They're not just responding to our mimicry. They're actively trying to communicate back. The session continued for another 30 minutes before Choi carefully withdrew from the containment area. As soon as he was through the airlock, the observation room erupted in celebration. They had just achieved the first peaceful, interactive contact with the Rakari in recorded history. In the debriefing room later, Choi sat with Dr. Kim and her team, still shaking with adrenaline. It was amazing, he said, his voice full of wonder. When you're in there with them, you can feel their intelligence. They're not just reacting. They're thinking, analyzing, trying to understand us just as much as we're trying to understand them. Dr. Kim was already planning the next phase. We need to build on this. Now that we've established basic communication, we can start introducing more complex interactions, maybe even begin teaching them human gestures while learning more of their plate patterns. The team worked late into the night, analyzing footage of the historic interaction. They documented every successful communication, every response, every new pattern they observed. What they had achieved was just the first step, but it was a step that changed everything humanity thought they knew about the Rakari. As the Martian night fell outside, Dr. Kim looked at the screens showing the now calm Rakari in their containment area. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel real hope. They hadn't just proved that peaceful interaction was possible. They had shown that the Rakari were capable of learning and adapting their behavior just as humans were. The path ahead would be long and challenging, but they had finally found the key to understanding these complex creatures. The question was no longer whether humans and Rakari could coexist, but how quickly they could learn to communicate with each other. The future of interspecies relations had changed forever in a single day, all because they had finally learned to speak the Rekari's language, not with words, but with the ancient language of predator-pack dynamics that both species, despite their differences, somehow shared. The Galactic Council's main chamber on Europa Station was filled with representatives from every known spacefaring civilization. They had gathered to witness something many had claimed was impossible: footage of humans and Rekari working together. On the massive central screen, a video played showing a human handler named Yunhua moving confidently among a group of Rekari. The alien's armor plates shifted in complex patterns as they responded to her commands, working together to move cargo and operate equipment. "This must be fake," the Centauri representative declared, his crystalline form glowing with agitation. "The Rekari cannot be tamed. We have tried for centuries." Dr. Kim stood calmly at the podium, waiting for the murmurs to die down. "We didn't tame them," she explained. "We learned to speak their language. There's a crucial difference." The next video showed a mixed human-Rekari crew performing maintenance on a spacecraft. The Rekari used their natural strength and agility to reach places humans couldn't, while the humans handled the technical aspects. Their cooperation was seamless, built on months of careful training and mutual understanding. "Impossible," a Proxian observer whispered, all three of its eyes wide with disbelief. Lead trainer Yunhua stepped forward to explain their breakthrough. She had spent months refining the communication protocols developed by Dr. Kim's team. The key was recognizing that the Rekari's social structure isn't primitive. It's just different from what we consider conventional civilization. She played more footage, this time showing the training process. "We don't force them to abandon their natural behaviors. Instead, we work within their existing social framework. Each mixed crew functions like a pack, with clear hierarchy and established roles." The evidence was hard to dismiss. Station after station reported successful integration of Rekari workers. Accident rates dropped to nearly zero when Rekari crews were properly trained and integrated. Their natural abilities made them invaluable for dangerous space work, while their pack mentality meant absolute loyalty to their human packmates. "But how do you prevent attacks?" the Proxian representative demanded. "They are predators by nature." Yunhua smiled. "Exactly. They are predators, and like all pack predators, they are fiercely protective of their own. Once a human is accepted as part of their pack, the Rekari will defend them with their lives." To demonstrate, she showed an incident from a mining operation where a human worker was nearly crushed by falling equipment. 2 Rekari crew members had instantly moved to save him, using their armored bodies as shields. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Trade ships began requesting Rekari crew members. Space stations that had once forbidden Rekari ships to dock now had special facilities for mixed species crews. The impossible had become routine. Not everyone was happy about the change. Some species felt threatened by humanity's unique ability to work with the Rekari. Others worried that the predatory species was being exploited, but the Rekari themselves seemed to thrive in their new roles. Dr. Kim's team documented everything. They observed how Rekari social structures adapted to include humans, how their communication patterns evolved to incorporate human gestures while retaining their own unique expressions. Most fascinating was how young Rekari began instinctively mimicking human behaviors, just as human children in the mixed communities began understanding Rekari plate patterns. "They're not just tolerating us," Dr. Kim explained during a research presentation. "They're genuinely integrating us into their society, just as we're integrating them into ours. It's a true cultural exchange." The biggest surprise came when a Rekari pack requested to join a deep space exploration mission. Their natural abilities and instincts proved invaluable in unknown territory. They could sense dangers that human instruments missed, and their protective nature meant additional security for the human crew. Yunhua continued developing new training protocols. She discovered that each Rekari pack had slightly different patterns and behaviors, like different dialects of the same language. She created a comprehensive database of these variations, helping new handlers understand the subtle nuances of Rakari communication. Watch their juvenile members, she would tell new trainers. They're the most adaptive, the most eager to learn new patterns. They're our bridge to the future. The success of the program led to unexpected developments. Other species began requesting human assistance in dealing with difficult alien races. Humanity's unique history with predator domestication had given them insights that other civilizations lacked. One evening, as Dr. Kim watched a group of human children playing with young Rakari in a station park, she realized how far they had come. The children showed no fear, understanding instinctively how to interact with their alien companions. The Rakari juveniles had adapted their play behavior to avoid hurting their softer human packmates. "We've created something entirely new," she told Yunhua, who stood beside her. "Not just cooperation between species, but true understanding." Yun nodded, watching as a young Rakari carefully helped a human child climb a play structure. "They protect their own," she said simply. "And now, we're their own." The galaxy had to accept a new reality. Humanity had not conquered or tamed the fearsome Rakari. Instead, they had done something far more remarkable. They had reminded both species of ancient truths about cooperation, trust, and the unexpected ways different beings could form bonds of loyalty and understanding. As night fell on the station, the mixed crews of humans and Rakari continued their work, their cooperation so natural now that few remembered a time when it had seemed impossible. The savage species that had once terrorized the galaxy have found their place, not through force or diplomacy, but through the simple, profound act of being understood. The alarms at Mars Station Alpha blared through the quiet Martian night. Captain Han Sung raced to the command center, his heart pounding. The Meridian Consortium ships had appeared without warning, their dark hulls barely visible against the starlit sky. "Status report," he barked, sliding into his command chair. His second in command, a massive Rakari named Kex, as humans pronounced it, stood beside him, armor plates shifting in patterns of alert and aggression. 3 consortium warships, Officer Liju reported, her fingers flying across the control panel. "They're deploying dropships, multiple boarding pods detected." Han shared a quick look with Kex. They had trained for this, but training was different from reality. The Meridian Consortium was notorious for their biological weapons and their attempts to weaponize other species. Now they had come for the Rakari. "Sound general quarters," Han ordered. "All integrated teams to defensive positions. Kex, signal your packs." The Rakari commander let out a series of sharp barks, his armor plates displaying command patterns. Throughout the station, other Rakari responded, their own plates shifting to acknowledge the orders. The first explosions rocked the station's outer walls. The consortium forces were trying to breach multiple points simultaneously. They had expected to find a research station defended by standard security forces. Instead, they found something unprecedented: humans and Rakari fighting as one. In the East Wing, a consortium strike team broke through. They were met by an integrated defense team led by Yunhua. The Rakari moved with incredible speed, their armored bodies providing cover for their human packmates who returned fire from protected positions. "They're using stun weapons," Yun shouted into her comm. "They're trying to capture, not kill." The realization spread quickly through the defending forces. The consortium wanted live specimens, both Rakari and human handlers. They hadn't counted on the depth of the bond between the two species. In the command center, Han watched the tactical display as more enemy forces breached the station. "Kex, take your pack and reinforce Section C. I'll coordinate from here." The Rakari commander's plates shifted in a pattern Han had learned to recognize as disagreement. "Pack stays together," Kex growled in his rough approximation of human speech. "You come too." Han started to argue, but he knew better. To the Rakari, leaving a pack member behind was unthinkable. He grabbed his emergency gear and followed his second-in-command into battle. The corridors of Mars Station had become a war zone. Consortium forces, in their sleek black armor, found themselves facing an enemy unlike any they'd encountered. Human Recari teams moved with perfect coordination. The Recari's natural armor and strength, combined with human tactical thinking and technology, created a devastating defensive force. Dr. Kim worked frantically in the secure lab, destroying research data before it could fall into enemy hands. A group of young Recari refused to leave her side, their plates showing patterns of protective determination. They had grown up in the research facility, and to them, Dr. Kim was as much pack as any Recari. The tide turned in Section D. A consortium team had cornered a group of human technicians, only to find themselves attacked from behind by their intended quarry. The untamed Recari they had hoped to capture turned out to be anything but, as integrated teams systematically cleared the section. Han and Kex led their mixed team through the station's maintenance tunnels, outflanking the main consortium force. The human captain had learned to read Recari body language as well as any handler, and his team moved like a well-oiled machine. "Remember," Han told his forces, "they want us alive. Use that against them." The Recari understood perfectly. They launched a series of feinting attacks, drawing the consortium forces into prepared kill zones where human defenders waited with heavy weapons. In orbit, the situation was just as chaotic. The station's defense ships, crewed by both species, proved far more effective than the consortium had anticipated. Recari space crews, with their natural ability to function in zero gravity, performed maneuvers that human pilots could only dream of. The breaking point came 3 hours into the battle. The consortium commander, frustrated by their losses, ordered his forces to switch to lethal weapons. The order was intercepted by the station's communications team. Han's voice crackled over the general frequency. "To all consortium forces, you came here expecting to find animals you could cage. Instead, you found a family you cannot break. This is your only warning. Withdraw or face the consequences." To emphasize his point, Kex let out a bone-chilling roar that echoed through the station's corridors. Every Recari in the facility responded, their combined voices creating a sound that made even veteran consortium troops hesitate. The enemy commander made his fatal mistake. He ordered an all-out assault. What followed would be remembered in military histories across the galaxy. Human and Recari forces moved as one, their coordination perfected through months of living and working together. The consortium forces found themselves facing not two separate species, but a single unified force that combined the best of both worlds. The battle ended as suddenly as it had begun. The remaining consortium forces retreated to their ships, leaving behind their wounded and dead. As the adrenaline faded, the true significance of what had happened began to sink in. Han stood with Kex in the command center, watching the enemy ships retreat into deep space. "They'll be back," he said quietly. The Recari commander's plates shifted in what Han had come to recognize as a smile. "Pack stronger together," Kex replied. "Always." Around them, humans and Recari worked side by side to repair the damage, treat the wounded, and strengthen their defenses. The consortium had hoped to drive a wedge between the species. Instead, they had proven just how unbreakable their bond had become. In her partially destroyed lab, Dr. Kim looked at the security footage of the battle. "They still don't understand," she said to no one in particular. "You can't weaponize trust. You can't break a pack by force." The Meridian Consortium had learned a costly lesson. The Recari were no longer just fearsome warriors. They were family. And humans would fight just as fiercely to protect their Recari packmates as the Recari would fight to protect their human ones. The story of the Mars Station defense spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In every spaceport and on every colony world, people shared recordings of human and Recari forces fighting as one. The footage showed Recari warriors using their armored bodies to shield human packmates, while humans provided covering fire and tactical support. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Dr. Kim's research facility became a pilgrimage site for xenobiologists and diplomatic teams from dozens of species. They all wanted to understand how humans had accomplished what centuries of advanced civilizations had failed to do. The answer, as Dr. Kim patiently explained, was surprisingly simple. We stopped trying to change them, she told a group of visiting scientists. Instead, we learned to understand them. The Rakari were never savages. They were just speaking a language no one else had tried to learn. Training centers sprang up across human space. Yunhua's comprehensive training protocols became the standard for all human Rakari integration programs. Young Rakari, raised among humans, showed even greater ability to adapt and communicate across species lines.